And it's a good afternoon and welcome to You and Your Business with me, Alec Drew, on 103.2 Dublin City FM. Each week, I invite an expert from the world of business to share their knowledge, insights, and tips to help you with your business challenges. If there's a topic you would like covered or you feel you can make a contribution, please email me at yourbusiness@dublincityfm.ie, and perhaps we'll be having a chat here one day soon. This is part two of a two-part interview, part one being last week. Certainly go back and listen to that. Fantastic guest that I have, and we're going to follow in the rest of the career here. Oh, both of these are absolutely fantastic and full of golden nuggets for you for your business. And my guest, again, delighted to welcome her back, is a global speaker. Everything she talks about is based on common sense and logic, as you will discover fairly quickly. And she has an opinion on absolutely everything, as you will also discover very quickly. I'm delighted to welcome back JdSG to You in Your Business studio. Hiya, Jenny.
Hi, Alec. My pleasure to be back, and thank you for having me back again.
You had us in suspense to a certain level at the last interview piece. We were talking about policies in the strangest of places, and we were talking about a policy around a duck breast. You have to tell us more about that and remind our listeners about
it. I'm not quite sure how we got into the choice of words policy. I think we were talking about the need to communicate in a positive way rather than a negative way.
That's it. That's exactly
and
it.
How most of us are guilty of taking the easy approach, like, don't do this, that's the wrong way. And I have almost made a lifetime career as a professional communicator on teaching my clients and my audiences how to impart the toughest negative information in a positive way. And so just to give the shortened version, I was in London 3 weeks ago, taking a very well-known dentist out for a very nice dinner at a very, very smart restaurant. And I ordered the leg of duck, or duck leg, and it arrived on the plate, looked absolutely beautiful with the plum sauce, but I could see it was boned. I know what my limitations are, and deboning is not a talent that I have. And having been married to 2 dentists who can debone a piece of meat with surgical precision, there is absolutely no need for me to learn how to debone a leg of chicken. So I look at the waiter with, I hope, was a gracious smile, and I said, I invite you, if you would be kind, to take it back and have it deboned for me. And he didn't even hesitate, Alec. He just looked at me. He said, it is our policy that we don't debone.
I'd love to see that written somewhere.
And so I did not even hesitate. I mean, as somebody who spent all this time on stage, my instinct immediately kicked in. And I looked at him with a slight smile, but quite stern. And I said, well, it is my policy as a customer to never return to any restaurant or refer any of my friends to any restaurant that has such a policy. Right. And I sort of then smiled at him, because obviously it wasn't his policy, it was management's policy. And then less than 30 seconds later, I've now got the tall manager in front of me who neither apologizes for the policy or even can restate the policy in a more positive way to me. He just informs me, madam, that is in fact our policy. And I can think of all sorts of different ways we could do it, but I have always advised my listeners and my clients and my audiences, whatever choice of words we use, policy is not one of them. Because and it was so fun in the restaurant, because I've said for years, when we have a policy, or that is not our policy, we are inviting the listener to say, and I've always dreamt of saying it, well, that's not my policy. And so the waiter gave me permission to do something I've been dying to do for 40 years.
Dead right, dead right. And it's amazing, like, the manager comes over without batting an eyelid to restate the most ridiculous thing. But I think there's a lesson for a lot of business owners in there.
Absolutely. And I have to say, having refused to debone, whether it's trout or whatever, I do not debone anything. I travel the world. I have never had a restaurant deny that extra service. Never.
Well, you see, they didn't have a policy, Jenny. That was the problem, you know. So he had to stand by his policy. But I'm going
So
to take
you're
you back to your I'm going to take you back to your career. We talked about the first part of it in the show we had last week. Professional speaking. This was a world that you were going to be lured into, and have enjoyed for quite some time. Talk about your early days, how you even got involved in it.
all right. I'm going to tell the story which I share when I'm dealing with entrepreneurs and people in the speaking industry. If I'm in dentistry, which is where I get the question all the time, Jenny, how did you become a speaker? My answer, Alec, never changes.
Right.
I look at them and say, it's a long story.
That's fine. We have
It's-
plenty of time.
Right. No, it's not a long story. It's a story that would not be appreciated by the people in the dental world. But when I'm dealing with entrepreneurs and speakers, and we're talking about perfectionism and procrastination and how to become risk takers, I will take a couple of minutes to tell the story, because even by the speaker world, it's quite dramatic.
Sure.
As I mentioned last week, I was running our successful dental practice. Evan was the dentist, me, the spouse. California, it's joint community, it's community. So I'm 50% owner of the practice. And I'm minding my own business and doing very well. But there's one thing I was not very good at, and that was asking patients to pay the bill. There are very few people in this world who enjoy asking people for money. It's not in our DNA. So I opened the mail one day and there's a really cheap, tacky flyer. I've still got it somewhere on blue paper. And it says, come to San Francisco. We're doing a full day program to healthcare professionals on how to ask patients to pay. I thought, I need this. So I sign up, drive to the Jack Tar Hotel, sit in the room all day. There are about 300 to 400 people in the room, physicians, dentists, vets, chiropractors, podiatrists, chiropodists, you name it, everybody, hospitals, the whole bit. And at the end of the day, I asked where the owner was or where the management was. So they pointed me to a gentleman called Len.
Sure.
And I said, I understand you're the owner of this program. He said, yes. I said, I want a full refund. He said, I'm sorry. I said, I want a full refund. He said, why would you want a full refund? I said, because your speaker was bad and her information was incorrect. And after he picked himself up off the floor, he sort of looked at me and he said, He said, have you ever spoken before? I said, absolutely not. He said, do you think you could do any better than she did? Now, excuse me for using the word, but this is exactly what I said to him. I said, I sure as hell couldn't do any worse. And he looked at me and he said, do you have a business card? And I still carry business cards. I may live in Silicon Valley in 2023. I still use business card. So I handed him the business card and he handed his business card to me. So I had a yellow pad in my hand because I'd been taking notes. So I walked into the lobby of the hotel, and for the next 3 hours, I designed the way I would have run a full day program talking about money.
All right.
Was going to see Baryshnikov that night at the Opera House. So did that, went home, wrote out my whole program in more detail, put his card on my desk and waited. And after about 4 weeks, he'd not called.
All right.
I designed a flyer. I took $10,000 out of my bank account, designed, printed, and mailed 8,000 flyers on the program I designed to be held in a hotel at San Francisco Airport. About 130 attendees walked in, paying about $125 each, never having been on stage before. So I stand up and I read the script for about 45 minutes. And then I thought, this isn't working. Just put the script down. And for the rest of the day, just because obviously I knew my material so well. And at the end of the day, all these dentists came up and said, Jenny, why have we never heard of you before? This stuff is fabulous. Well, of course, I'd never spoken before. So that's how I became a professional speaker in one day, banked a lot of money. And for the next many, many years, would go across the States and Canada. And I would put a flyer together, maybe have 6, 7, 8, 10 hotels in various states, in various areas, and then fly in, do sales and catering, organize everything. Sometimes you made a lot of money, sometimes maybe you didn't make so much money. So that's how I got into the speaking business. And the point of my story is, and even when I tell that story to professional speakers, they sort of blink, because in the speaking world, Alec, we're told, you've got to speak for free. You've got to do your little baby steps. No, I just jumped in the deep end. And at the end of the day, if you have passion and are so moved to move your subject forward, then it becomes a non-issue. I mean, it never entered my mind that this would not work.
Can we just do a bit of an analysis around the difference between the speaker that he had put on stage and why you wanted your money back versus what you were doing?
That is actually a very perceptive question. And one of the things that, and I just had an hour's phone call with a good friend of mine yesterday, and she and I have been around the block for some time. And we talked about the speakers who are in the trenches and have walked their talk versus the speakers who are, in the old days, we'd call it plagiarizing. And in today, I call it repurposing. We have so many people in the speaking business who are repackaging other people's stuff. Right. And so they're talking about it, Alec, in almost a third person approach, right? Which is what this speaker was doing. And whereas when I get up, I'm very much into, most people in this world are an extrovert or an introvert. We're either left brain or right brain. That's the majority of the world. A very small percentage of us, under 10%, are ambiverts, which means we're right brain, left brain. So my definition of a professional communicator, because that's what you and I are talking about, not just speaking, but communicating. Yes, of course. My ideal stereotype, if I may use that word, of a professional communicator is an ambivert. Right brain, emotional, get them motivated, give them the big picture, let them see the light at the end of the tunnel. Then the left brain kicks in and says, now these are the 4 steps to make that happen. These are the 5 things to avoid. And then if you can bridge the right brain and the left brain with a sense of humor and wit and thinking on your feet, and taking control without them feeling they're having control taken away from them. Sure. That to me is a speaker's speaker or a professional communicator.
Right. Again, it must have been a challenge to get on stage. So you'd written out the script, but then, as you said, you'd learned sufficiently well to be able to move away from it. What did you perceive of the audience was happening that helped you make that decision after maybe 45 minutes of
you actually raised a point that I hadn't thought to raise, and that is, when I say I learned the script, there are 2 schools of thought with speakers, and there is a school of thought, and I believe that Toastmasters falls into this camp, more of perhaps learning a speech and having it sort of word perfect. I simply do not come from that camp. I know the motivational speakers, they learn a script, they learn their movements, they know where the light is. It's a work of art and it's almost drama. I do not come from that school of thought. So when I say I learned a script, I work from bullets. So I could have 5 words on one bullet and I could speak on that for 5 minutes or 2 hours. So I'm very structured. And yes, I have turn of phrase, but I urge anybody listening who is a professional communicator not to get caught into, I'm not saying it's wrong, but I like to see more spontaneity. And to answer the question, if you are not reading a script or reading PowerPoint and you're looking at your audience and watching your audience will tell you when you are connecting with them.
And if you're just joining us now, you're listening to You and Your Business with me, Alec Drew, on 103.2 Dublin City FM, where my guest today is Jenny de St. George. And we're just talking about professional communications, I think, rather than professional speaking. And I think you made a very, very good point there, that not to be learning something off by heart, because I think that does remove some of the emotion, and it actually hinders your connection with the audience. Whereas you can say the same thing 100 times differently that responds to an audience and what they need.
I saw an interview with somebody about Amy Whitehouse. I was late to listening to Amy's voice, and when I first Whitehouse,
Winehouse.
Whitehouse, I knew it was some, yes. And so I was late to listening to her voice, and absolutely became mesmerized by her voice. And she did a lot of recording in the States. And there was an interview with the English group in Florida that recorded with her. And the guy who was being interviewed said the interesting thing about Amy is that if you asked her to, he said, I once asked her why, when she does a song, Black on Black, it's never the same twice in a row. She said, why would I repeat it? And that's all she said. Why would I repeat it?
Yes. Yeah. And that's a good answer. And it does cover the point we were just talking about very succinctly. In terms of your speaking business, which, you've traveled the world, you encounter many different audiences, different nationalities, different ethnic groups. How have you had to maybe adjust your speaking to fit within those audiences?
I adore this question. If I had written down a couple of questions, Alec, and sent them to you, this would have been a question. This happens a lot. And let me tell you a very quick story so visually the listener can get it. I'm in Sydney, Australia. This was some years ago at the most probably one of the most famous dental global meetings in the world, the FDI meeting. And I have about 500 dentists in the room, no staff. And I'm assuming from countries across the globe. And the dentist stands up towards the back. The troublemakers are always in the back by the front, by the way. They're never in the front. They always want to be in the back where they can boom their frustration and their dislike of you from the back. And this dentist stands up and he says, Mrs. D. St. George, he said, I've been listening to you all morning. And he said, there is an assumption I feel on your part that you're English and you live in California and you travel the world, but we have maybe 45 nations represented in this room. Why would you think your way is applicable to everybody? And you know me, I don't think about these answers. I find my answer, sure, it's already out. And then my brain says, oh, that was pretty good, Jenny. Didn't even stop for breath. I said, common sense and logic, doctor, has no international borders. I will give you 10% for cultural changes, 90% fits any level of any country. He looked at me, I looked at him, he sat down. That was the end of the conversation.
Yes, and it was the right answer. And you probably realized that, and it is a good answer. And I think our audience should consider that when they're potentially standing up in front of an audience and speaking.
I don't want to generalize, but I'm presuming there's a very good chance that when somebody feels the need to attack the speaker, because that really, he was sort of attacking me or challenging me, it's most probably because he either didn't want to make the change or felt threatened that the change would cause more problems than the way he's doing it. He's not ready to embrace that. Perhaps he was not open to accept the change, so it was easy for him to say that the new stuff wouldn't work.
Sure. Yes. And that's a valid point. In terms of the structure of your talks, obviously they respond to the audience. And as you said, you could speak for 5 minutes or 5 hours, depending on what it is. How do you approach an event in terms of the material? I mean, you've gathered so much over so many years. How do you structure your talk to bring an audience in? Because you're not a big PowerPoint fan, are you?
No, I choose not to use it. I certainly have used it on Zoom. And yes, I've got some software loaded. I've got Ecamm and Stream Deck, and I've got my green screen sitting in the corner. And I've got somebody coming in to get me up to speed on those, because I think if you're going to do virtual, there is a logical reason for it. But at the moment, when I'm live on stage, it's me communicating to the audience, and I find PowerPoints very distracting.
Sure.
So your question on structure,
yes,
is, again, it's an absolute brilliant question, because since Zoom, I've completely changed my structure. Every program I have a course outline. I've done it for years. I could sit down and put a brand new program together on a subject I've never done, and at the end of about 6 hours, I would have the whole thing ready to go on stage. Before COVID and Zoom, I would always start with the ideal. So any program I would talk about, I would start with the ideal way to handle this situation. And then I would handle the what ifs. And after Zoom, if you're doing an hour's presentation on Zoom, because my presentation is usually a 1 day or more, you don't in 1 hour have enough time to just talk about the ideal, because you'll never get to the what ifs. So after Zoom, or during Zoom, I completely rechanged it, and I put the end of the program to the beginning and the beginning to the end. So now I start off with the what ifs and the problems. I take them out of pain, and then I finish with, now, if we ideally do it this way, you won't have the pain of what we've experienced. And so when I went live after Zoom for the first time, and I did it in the new way, I felt my relationship with the audience completely different, and the energy was there from the second, because it was called Take Them Out of Pain, as we'd say in dentistry, take them out of pain and reappoint. So while I was trying to do my morning session in the ideal, they're sitting saying, yes, well, that sounds wonderful, but how can I solve my problem? Because I hadn't addressed it. So by flipping it, I've become even more relevant. Take them out of pain, solve their problems, then give them a structure and a format and an approach so that hopefully they don't have problems again.
Okay, that seems all very simple, but it's only taken you a lifetime to put it all together and
Yep.
make a success of it. I suppose in the 5 minutes we've left, what next for you and your career, or else if you want to share more advice for our audience?
Well, one thing I'd like to talk, when you asked about advice, we talked about perfectionism and procrastination and being a risk taker. And then we talked about the choice of the word policy and the poor leg of chicken, which is going to get restated several times. One of the things I've made a point to do, Alec, is to discuss implementing change, because for perfectionists and procrastinators, and most people in general, making a change is really tough. I did read a figure in the States a couple of years ago that something like 97% of Americans who make a New Year's resolution have fallen off the wagon by February.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
Because that implementing of a different approach. So for those who are listening, who deal with clients and customers, and we talked about not using the word policy, is when you go to implement change, if you choose to do something different tomorrow with your clients and customers who have experienced it currently a different way than you want to do, and you receive a complaint, well, that's not the way we've always done it. Hang on a second, what do you mean I have to do this? I'm used to doing that. Instead of saying it is our new policy, I came up with a phrase that really has worked well with my audiences and clients. We used to do it that way. So when somebody asks for something that you don't want to offer anymore, but they want it, you say, Mrs. Brown, we used to do it that way. We have found it's in our customers' best interest too, and then you put the benefit of the new way. So it's exactly where we were talking earlier, Alec, where we turn everything around and we feed it back to the listener from their perspective. You're correct. We did used to close on Wednesdays, or we did used to let customers come in on a Saturday. We used to do it that way. And so we've not defended or justified that we've changed it. We've acknowledged the way we used to do it. And now hopefully we can sell the benefit of the change. So thank you for the opportunity, because implementing change productively is a huge part of growth.
You had me go silent there for a minute. I was listening and just absorbing that. And I must say it's a very positive message, because it's positive in every sense. As you said, we're forever putting barriers in front of people. No, you can't do this. And because, however, when you twist the message around, you know, you're acknowledging you heard what they want. You've explained why there's been a change and the benefit of that change for you as the customer.
And in a way you can say it's manipulation, but it's manipulation with love, because we're doing it in the end for their benefit. Because if we're changing it, one would like to think we're changing it for better service or a better result for our customer or client.
So I could say to you, in terms of deboning a duck breast, we used to do it that way. However, we'll play around with that, but that's fantastic. I must say, I really love that. In the minute we've left, have you anything you'd like to share or tell people where they can find out more about you, which is just as important?
Well, thank you. My website is my initials, JdSG.com. I am in the middle, as I mentioned, of actually putting two websites into one. So my speaker website and my dental website is being merged. So at the moment, you won't see anything about my speaking entrepreneur on my dental, but this is happening as we speak. And if I can be of help to anybody, and this is the way I'd like to offer it to your listeners, I am happy to offer a 12-minute complimentary Ask Jenny Anything. And if you send me an email to Jenny, Jenny, at JdSG.com, and be sure to put Alec Drew's name in the subject line. It is my pleasure to work with somebody complimentary for 12 minutes. It is amazing how I can creatively solve problems in 12 minutes. If you need more than 12 minutes, that's another conversation for another day.
Well, what a great way to finish the show. A special thanks to our guest, Jenny de St. George, for coming into the You and Your Business studio, not once, but twice, for the show last week and the show this week. Thanks also to Sam on Sound. The podcast of today's show will be available on dublincityfm.ie from tomorrow. Thank you for your company, and please remember to join me, Alec Drew, again next week at the same time, 1 o'clock right here on 103.2 Dublin City FM for another edition of You and Your Business.